Welcome to lesson 21 of Write That Novel Now. I'm Jim Parsons, your writing mentor, and there's still lots to tell you about how to write a novel. In fact, I don't know how many more lessons we've got ahead of us, but I thought we'd finish it by 20, but we're not. This week, we're going to look at how to add dialogue tags in the middle of sentences, break up the dialogue in a couple of different ways. So that's coming up. At the end of the lesson, I'll be giving you a lengthy self-test. Email me and get a hard copy of it and an answer sheet, very important, so that you can just see how you're going. Let's make a start. Okay, as promised last week, we're going to move on with punctuating dialogue using a dialogue tag, one you're familiar with, the he said, she said, John said. And I've reserved this one for a lesson on its own. It's when, instead of putting it on the front, like John said, blah, 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 or blah, 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 John said, we're going to break into the middle of the dialogue. And there's two types you'll find. One is when there are two complete sentences and we spread them apart and we put the dialogue tag in the middle, or it can be one long sentence and we find a spot where we interrupt that sentence and put the dialogue tag in there. So let's have a look at that. Here's an illustration of each type. Number one is the two-sentence structure. I made pasta, full stop, one sentence. I do hope you like it. That's your second full sentence. And so we can put something in between there. The second one doesn't have a break. I would suggest that we take two cars. Now, if we want to interrupt that, we're going to have to find a logical place to break that sentence. Let's treat the first one. I made pasta. I do hope you like it. What about if we break it there and we put Joe said in? I made pasta, Joe said. I do hope you like it. Now, please be aware there is no punctuation here. This is an illustration of where we might put it. There's not even anywhere. Okay. The second one, you have a think where's a logical place you might interrupt this sentence to put in a dialogue tag. How about there? I would suggest, Joe said, that we take two cars. Does that make sense? Now, when it comes to unbroken sentences that we want to break into, they're not necessarily short. They can be quite long. Now, this one's a little over long, but it's quite a legit sentence. I hope you realise that if we're all going to visit Mother together, it might overwhelm her and she could have one of her nasty turns. Okay. Where will we break that? How about here? I hope you realise, Charles said, that if we're all going to visit Mother together, it might overwhelm her and she could have one of her nasty turns. What do you think? You like it there? No? All right, let's try another one. I hope you realise that if we're all going to visit Mother together, Charles said, it might overwhelm her and she could have one of her nasty turns. There's two possibilities. Which do you prefer? Huh? Neither? Okay, let's try it again. How about, this is your last chance, how about here? I hope you realise that if we're all going to visit Mother together, it might overwhelm her, Charles said, and she could have one of her nasty turns. Now, each of those three positions is legitimate. And while at the moment all I want to talk about is how we end up punctuating it, I'll just point out to you that some of these things are stylistic matters. They can also be what you're trying to point out or allow Charles to point out. In this last one, Charles's emphasis is on that nasty turn, isn't it? If you broke it up at the start, I hope you realise, Charles said, what happens then? Well, basically that pause on I hope you realise makes the reader listen just as his audience might listen to these words of wisdom that are coming. Right? So it depends on your purpose or what you want to give Charles as his purpose that will decide where you choose to break into this piece. Okay, they are all the examples that we can work with. Now let's actually do the punctuation. Starting off with the simple one again, two sentences. I made pasta, I do hope you like it. Now, when that's a standalone sentence, as it is, of course, there's going to be opening quote marks at the start and closing quote marks at the end. You're going to have a full stop after each sentence. It's all there, okay? Now, what I'd recommend is to work on this is to break it up into the three components. I'm doing it like this as a list so that you can see these three elements. The opening and closing quote marks are still there, but the middle's a little bit bare, isn't it? Okay, let's have a look at a little further at this. We can add a quote mark there and identify that as a single sentence now on its own. And we there at the start of I do hope you like it. And now we have two completely punctuated pieces of dialogue. We just got to get Joe said in there somewhere. So let's put Joe said up there, get rid of the last one, and let's have a look at it. Okay, suddenly it's not working anymore. Those two standalone pieces of dialogue were fine until Joe got messing with it. Okay, so what's wrong with it? It's a legitimate sentence. I made pasta, Joe said. So how should we punctuate it? The way we always would. You can't tag on Joe said and leave a full stop. So we're going to have to put a comma in. There's still something wrong? Yep, it's now a longer sentence. I made pasta used to be the sentence. It's now longer. We have to complete that sentence with that full stop. Now, that's legitimate. That's a complete, correctly punctuated sentence. I made pasta, Joe said. And you would know that from our previous lessons if you've been watching. So what do we do now? We have to float that one in. Notice not a thing changes. The second sentence was perfectly okay as a standalone sentence. And that's all we have to do. Change the comma in the first one and put it in there. Now, you would remember that we only have to change it to a comma if it was a full stop. In other words, if that sentence was a statement. If it was a question or an exclamation, don't have to do a thing to it. We just put Joe said, full stop, and then the next. Okay, so that's the simplest form. Let's run back through it. I made pasta, Joe said. We changed that to what is beneath it. I made pasta, comma, Joe said, full stop. And then we add that. No problem. And just to demonstrate that once you've got the first element correct, you can put anything on the end. Let's run through a few. I made pasta, Joe said. I hope you like it. Do you want some? It's delicious. Okay. Notice as I flip through those, the first half doesn't alter in any way, not scrap. The others are punctuated according to their need. So when it's a question, of course, it gets a question mark. When it's an exclamation, it gets an exclamation. So get the first bit right and then just tag the second bit on as if it was a standalone sentence. What if the first bit not? Okay, the first bit this time is not a statement. I've given you two possibilities. Do you like pasta? Pasta, yum. Right, now we've got an exclamation. And we'd like to put Joe said on each of those. Do we have to do a thing? Not a thing. Just slap Joe said, full stop, on those first sentences. So there you have the three forms as you've seen in the past. I made pasta, statement, and so we change it to a comma. Joe said. Do you like pasta? Question mark. Joe said. Pasta, yum. Joe said. All good. And we can float in some other things at the end. It doesn't matter what you put after those then. So, do you like pasta? Joe said. I made heaps. So question followed by a statement. Second one, pasta, yum, Joe said. Do you like it too? So we have an exclamation followed by a question. And as long as you get the individual pieces correctly punctuated, all you have to do is slap them together. Okay? Are you ready for a self-test? Okay, I'm going to run the test. The minute you see it, hit pause and do it. And when we come back, I will show you the answers. Here they are. I'm going to ask you to insert Bill said between each pair of sentences. So Number 1, my mother makes the best blueberry pie. Bill said, you're in for a treat. Or, where have you been? Bill said, I haven't seen you for ages. Okay, that's all I'm expecting of you. Hit the pause button and have a go. All right, I'm back. If you've suddenly got an attack of the guilt because you didn't do it and you know I'm going to be really upset, here's your opportunity. You can still stop the video now and do the exercise. Okay, if you just want to upset me, let's go on and do the answers. The answers. Okay, you're going to open your quote marks, use a capital. After blueberry pie, you need a comma because you're going to connect dialogue tag. So comma, close quote marks, Bill said. Full stop because that's a full sentence there. And you start your next sentence with quote marks, capital, finish with a full stop at the end there and close the quote. Number 2, opening quote marks, capital W, and it's a question. Where have you been? So you've got to put a question mark in there, plus your quote marks after, all punctuation inside the quote marks. And then it's simply a matter of putting Bill said on the end of that, full stop. Open your quote marks of the second sentence. It'll start with a capital I, haven't seen you for ages, full stop, close quotes. Number 3, open quote marks, capital S on send. Me a postcard when you arrive. That's a statement. It's not strong enough to be a command, it's a request, so you don't have to use an exclamation. But treat it as a statement and put your comma, close the quote marks, then add Bill said, full stop. New sentence, start off with the quote marks. I have fond memories of Mykonos, full stop, inside the final quote mark. Number 4, now we do have an exclamation. Hurry up. So we open quotes with a capital H on hurry. Hurry up. Exclamation mark inside that quote mark. Then add Bill said, full stop. Start your new sentence with a capital W. And of course, with a quote mark, opening quotes. We don't want to miss the first act. Full stop inside the final quote mark. The last one is a reverse of that, just to show you how it changes things a little. We don't want to miss the first act. Bill said, hurry up. So we're starting off with a statement this time. And so it's open quotes, capital W. We don't want to miss the first act. Then you put your comma, close quotes. Throw in Bill said, full stop, and then you have that standalone, if you like to call it so, a standalone exclamation. So we open with the quote mark, capital H on hurry, hurry up, exclamation mark inside the final quote. How did you go? You'll get there. All right, let's push on with the second part. We're still talking about mid-dialogue punctuation, and now we're talking about interrupt a sentence. We've dealt with I made pasta, I do hope you like it, 2 sentences. Now we're going to look at the second one. I would suggest that we take 2 cars, single sentence, and where are we going to break it? Right there. I would suggest Joe said that we take 2 cars. So far, it hasn't got any punctuation. Let's punctuate. Breaking it down into 3 bits, I would suggest Joe said that we take 2 cars. So it's shaping up like that first one, except that the first one had full sentence at the top and the bottom. Right? This time we've got 2 bits of sentences. I would suggest that we take 2 cars. Let's analyse what this is all about. Well, I would suggest this is going to be the words that are spoken. And the middle bit, Joe said, that's the narrator jumping in here to tell you something. What's the narrator telling you? That Joe saying this. And then we get back to the spoken words again with that we take 2 cars. We know that words spoken, dialogue, should have quote marks around them. So let's do that. Regardless of whether the rest of the punctuation is correct, we know that when we break up the sentence, we need quote marks front and back, at the start, at the end where it's broken, and then Joe said gets none because it's not words spoken, it's facts that are given to us by the narrator. And the second bit, that we take 2 cars, it's not a complete sentence, but it still gets quote marks at either end. Let's get rid of that last one. So there we are. We've got, I would suggest Joe said. Let's put Joe said there. And what else do we have to do? It doesn't look right. We need a comma. To show that we're breaking this sentence up, think of that as a lever that's pushing the sentence apart. I would suggest, comma, and there's those quote marks. Then we just say Joe said. Now, in the past, what have we done? We put a full stop there. Why? Because it was a complete sentence. In the past, I like pizza, Joe said. Complete sentence, full stop. But is this a complete sentence? I would suggest, Joe said, no way, because you can even hear in the lilt of the voice, something else is to follow. So we don't have a full stop. It is wrong. I would suggest, Joe said, now we're right. We have another comma. So Joe said is sandwiched between commas. Note, though, that the comma at the front is within the quote marks. And this is a mistake that many novice writers make. They put that comma outside the quote. I would suggest comma, closing quotes for that bit, then Joe said, and because it's not finished, there's more to come, we only have a comma here. And then we can put the second bit in exactly the way it was, just as if it were that second sentence, second complete sentence that we've dealt with before. Okay? We just put it straight in there. But notice it's got its quote marks, but do you notice something about the that? It doesn't have a capital because it's not the start of a new sentence. It's a continuation of an old sentence. Okay? No capital. Just to reinforce that, let's look at the 2-sentence structure. And I'm using a similar concept here. I have an idea, Joe said, let's take 2 cars. Very similar to what we've been working with. But this time, I have an idea is a statement. And it's a single sentence. It stands alone. I have an idea, Joe said. End of a sentence. There, we put in the full stop. When we start the next bit, let's take 2 cars. It's a standalone sentence too, and so it starts with a capital L. Have a good look at that, and then cast your eyes straight below it at the one we've been working on, which is a broken sentence. I would suggest, comma, the same as the one above, comma, said Joe, but because it's going on, it's a comma again, not that full stop. You can even hear it in the voice. The first one, I have an idea, said Joe. Right? The voice drops. Second one, I would suggest, said Joe. Voice lifts. So you can even hear it in the way we say it. And so we have a comma there. And then you notice where the top one started with a capital because it's its own independent sentence, all on its own. The poor little bit on the second one is a continuation of the first part, so it doesn't get a capital. Can you think of an example where it might get a capital? Okay, how about, I would suggest, Joe said, Bill should do the driving. In that case, that second portion would start with a capital B for Bill, but not because it's a complete sentence, but because Bill gets a capital letter because it's a proper noun. Let's have a look at a few other examples to really hammer this home. If you need a reason to get political, this is it. Right? One single sentence. Where could we break it? How about after political? We'll get Mary a go at this. If you need a reason to get political, Mary said, this is it. Now, it's not finalised. It's just showing that insert. It had a quote mark at the start and a quote mark at the end. Good, they're there, but we need to add, to show that it's now broken up, we need to finish off the first bit with a comma, show that's where the break is, although the comma was already there. That's fine, we'll deal with that in a minute. The comma was already there, but we need it. Close the quote marks of the first bit to say end of the speech. Now it's the narration again. Mary said, narration over, put the comma. We're going back to the words, open the quote, this is it. And because that's a continuation of the sentence, no capital. Is that okay? Here's a couple more. Whatever else he might be, John is not a coward. And the other one, there is every reason to get behind this movement. Now, I've put these together to illustrate something else. Very often, when we're going to insert a dialogue tag, there's a U-Butte spot to place it, and that is there's a natural pause in the sentence because there's a clause that's on the front. Whatever else he might be, comma. So we've got a comma there already. It's a perfect place to insert something. Whatever else he might be, Mary said, John is not a coward. So perfect placing because there's a comma there. The second one doesn't have a comma to give you any guidance. You have to make a decision. There is every reason to get behind this move and support it. One sentence, probably you'd pause after reason. Every reason, Mary said, to get behind this move and support it. Or maybe there is every reason to get behind this move, Mary said, and support it. Depends what you want to get out of this, okay? So let's deal with the first one. Whatever else he might be, John is not. Have that nice comma there ready for us. But notice we also have quote marks up the front, quote marks out the back, and a full stop at the right spot. Let's see what we do. We want to put in Mary said in the middle. So we have to show that the first part of the sentence has been chopped off, end of the speech, and then a dialogue piece, which is narration, really. It's the narrator telling us what's happening here, who's speaking. So then we have the piece, comma, to indicate we're not done yet. Open the quotes, John is not a coward. Take that back, have a look. Watch for it. Pop, there it is. The next one, as I said, it doesn't give us a clue where it should go. We can choose. So let's choose after reason. This time we have to add that, and we have to add the quote mark to indicate that that's the end of the voice we're hearing. Now we're hearing the narrator coming in, Mary said. Comma again to indicate we're moving on to the return to the sentence. Open the quote marks, get behind this movement, full stop, and all the rest. Is everybody okay with that? Great. Well, that's all for lesson 21. Hope you're getting a lot of value out of these lessons on punctuation. This concludes what we'll be doing on dialogue punctuation. Next week, we're still talking dialogue. There's so much to learn about how to write good dialogue. We've only just started. Now, if you would like that self-test, which covers a whole lot of dialogue punctuation, it's a pretty tough test. If you pass it, if you do well in it, it means you now have mastered good dialogue punctuation. Write to me at writing-course@hotmail.com and ask for a hard copy of it through your email and the answer sheet, of course, so that you can get your answers. And I'll be happy to send that to you. Until next week, goodbye, and thanks for watching. Keep safe. you.